All right, we'll get started in about 2 minutes.
We'll get to know each other. Maybe we will make it through till
I'm really
summer.
excited about this week's lesson.
And maybe we will get
Yeah, we don't talk a lot about how to learn very often. Thanks for the music tonight, Chibo. Who was that? It was cool.
That was Summer by L. Martin. I sound like a radio DJ. Yeah, that was Summer by L. Martin, and inspired by the warmer spring weather that's coming through.
How's the weather in Toronto?
Seems warm. It's actually very cold, but I'm pretending like it's warm, so I've put my winter jacket away. I'm manifesting good weather from here on out.
I love it. All right, I'm gonna go full screen and then we'll get started in just a second. Great. Can you see those slides?
Yes, we are all set.
Wonderful. Okay. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you all enjoyed your week off. If you had a week off from school, I hope you enjoyed that as well. If you didn't, you had a week off from CU at least. And we are back for the essentially the second half of our fellowship. We're still in the personal development unit. And so tonight we're going to be talking about the science of learning, how to learn, which is a topic you don't really hear a lot about in schools. Some of you might be able to take like a study skills class or something like that, but it usually is kind of watered down from my experience. And I think tonight will hopefully give you some tips that you can actually use during school this year, next year, and for the rest of your life. So really happy and excited to be back and joined by Chibu tonight. So thanks for joining us. Okay, so before we get into tonight's lesson, a couple quick announcements and clarifications. Some people have been asking about projects, whether they have to do a mandatory project as part of CU by the end of the fellowship. And the answer is no. There is no mandated project. You don't have to launch your own initiative. You don't have to start your own nonprofit. This is a learning journey. If some of you want to do that, then we will gladly help you along the way. But there's no mandatory project that you need to complete as part of the fellowship. The only project that I'd say that you're all completing is really the leadership blueprint. If you're doing that every week, by the end of the fellowship, you'll have completed a pretty big project. You'll and discovered a lot about yourself. So that's the only project that we're doing week to week. There is no mandatory big project at the end of the fellowship. Second update about Nick's New Knowledge, the sessions that we started 2 weeks ago. The last time we met, we convened and talked about free speech and Facebook's new free speech oversight board. I wanted to bring that up again because if you couldn't attend, it was a really, really great discussion. Highly recommend you watching the recording of it. And I wanted to talk about it again just quickly because we at CU want to make sure that we're living up to the ideals and values of the First Amendment, like we talked about in that session. We don't want to be stifling the free speech of our fellows unless there's a really, really good reason. And we talked about this. The Supreme Court has said, and in schools, you can't stifle that free speech unless there's a material and substantial disruption to the learning environment. Or in the real world, you can't stifle that free speech unless it's going to cause some threat, right? Unless it can lead to the incitement of violence. And so unless we're reaching that level, we don't want to stifle the free speech of others in our community. And that doesn't mean we want to allow for nonsense or trolling to go on. We definitely don't want that as part of our community. But as long as it's earnest and good faith, we're going to allow that speech. And we need to get used to recognizing that, because we don't want this place to become an echo chamber where we just hear the same opinions all over and over and over again. So just keep that in mind as we move through the fellowship. Also, our next session is going to be this Wednesday. We're really excited about that. We're going to be talking about the history of voting rights, the Voting Rights Act, and Georgia's new voting legislation, and trying to place that new law in context so we can really understand beyond the headlines what that is. So hope you can join me on Wednesday for that. And so with that, I'll let Shabu tell us about the agenda.
All right, so today's agenda, we're going to be focusing on a few things, specifically scientifically proven ways to learn better, which I'm really excited to dive into, and then also 5 ways to learn about any topic, so some tips and tricks that we've kind of come up with, and then of course our Q&A session, followed by our breakout hangout. And then just to recap of last week, or really the week before that, we kind of discussed the ways that you can contribute to your community. So the roles you can play for yourself, your Junto, your fellowship class, and then again, our wider communities. So we kind of examined 5 key ways for a healthy team culture. And so that includes psychological safety, dependability, structure and clarity, meaning, and of course, impact. And so we have our first rapid response round question, which is, how do you think you learn best? And of course, you can respond in the Slack channel.
Alone. I learned by doing. Writing notes, that's a good one. Talking to other people, watching others, listening and doing. Conversation. Asynchronously, that's a cool one. Teaching other people, I love that one. At night, asking questions. Yeah, I see teaching others coming up a lot.
I like reflecting on what I've read. Always really good to do that.
Visually, yep, a couple visual learners.
Questioning, always really good way to build on stuff.
Making mistakes, yes. That some people say that's the only way to learn. Repetition, yes. That's another great one.
Ooh, connecting it to a feeling or an experience I've had. I love that. That's a really great way to have really meaningful learning experiences.
Thanks, Gary. All right, so thank you everybody for those responses. So tonight we're going to be talking about how to learn best. I really appreciate that you all have different ways at learning, and so we're going to talk about some fact and fiction about how to learn best, because this is an area and really an industry that has been around for a long time, because people want to know how to learn. That's something that's not new. And there is real science on this stuff. We don't have to just pretend and make it up. So first piece of advice on learning is to do spaced repetition. Again, this is scientifically proven. Many studies have looked at this, including a Dartmouth study that I have linked here. And I'll send you the slides as always afterwards if you want to see the study. What they found is that taking breaks between reviewing material was more effective than continuous repetitive studying. So if you study for an hour or two, take an hour break, eat something, then come back to it, you're going to retain more knowledge than if you had studied straight through. You might think that, oh, if I just put in 4 or 5 straight hours of studying, I will have memorized this material and be great for the exam the next day. But no, science has proven that you'd be better off studying less and taking a break and letting your brain soak in that material than studying straight through. So that's the number one tip that I have is spaced repetition. Second, different people learn best through different mediums. But that doesn't mean you just have one learning style. So many of you said, for instance, you're a visual learner or an auditory learner or an active learner. That's fantastic that you found this out about yourself. But you don't want to limit yourself to just that method of learning. Because if you say, I only learn auditorily, then you're never going to be able to consume visuals, right? You're never going to be trying to write, essentially. And this myth that we all have just one learning style has actually been debunked. And so I put a link to that article. The Atlantic wrote a really good piece about that. We might have a preference for learning, but that doesn't mean it's the only way that we learn. It's the equivalent of saying, like, I'm terrible at math, right? Then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, and then you never do math if you believe that. So it's good to get out of our comfort zone sometimes and try different methods of learning. So here are some more suggestions that I have for you. I really like this quote. And it says, if you want to learn something for the long run, you have to write it down. If you want to really understand something, you have to translate it in your own words. That's a little bit like the old adage that if you want to become an expert in something, teach it. If you really want to show that you've learned something, then try to teach it to somebody. That makes a really big difference. And once you have to answer questions on the fly with no prep, that really teaches you if you understand something. So if you really want to know if you understand, say, the French Revolution for your European history class or your world history class, try to teach it to somebody and then see, like, wow, there's some real gaps in my knowledge there. That'll force you to go back and learn it. Another method that I love, and this is a method I used in college, grad school, law school, studying for the bar exam, is outlining. I love to take all of the notes that I've been given in a class and try to distill it into one document, one outline. And this outline is my study tool. But it's not the outline itself that helps me study. It's actually the process of creating the outline. Doing that process is what's important, not the finished product. And you can use any format you like when you outline. And if you want my preferred method, I'll share it with you if you want to email me, or you can see the template that I put in here. But outlining is my preferred method for studying by far. And then finally, my last tip is to set goals for yourself and then take breaks with a reward. This is similar to the spaced repetition that we learned about before. But the idea here is to outline or study for an hour or two and then reward yourself. Say, I'm going to have a slice of pizza. I'm going to watch a half hour of Netflix or an hour, and then go back to it. That's the best way, I think, to study.
And those are all really incredible tips. I know I used some of them also like throughout my first year of college. So definitely kudos to those. Some of my suggestions kind of revolve around learning outside of an academic context. So just like learning for self-knowledge or things that you're interested in. So one that's really important is connecting the dots. So understanding how new learning connects to topics that you're already familiar with, it makes it easier to build that new knowledge because you're kind of working from a premise that you understand. And then it also kind of enriches and further develops the topics that you're already interested in. So you're kind of building in a way that supports learning new things, but then also furthering the things you understand already. And then second to that, I want to talk about primary resources. So in a world where narratives are constantly shifting and reliable sources of information are rare, so learning from those who are personally impacted, especially by social issues, is like a personal priority for me. And it's been really, really productive in the sense that I don't want to create situations where I feel the need to unlearn something. So it's really great to go straight from the source. And that usually often means also exploring um, things outside of like a normal academic context or referencing the news. And you get to look at different mediums, whether that's documentaries or personal stories or even fiction. And that also makes the learning process a bit more exciting too. So those are my two tips, connecting the dots and then also really focusing on primary resources. And that leads us to our second response round. Where do you typically learn from? And of course, I'd love to see all your answers in the Slack channel.
Internet, very, very common nowadays. Classroom, yep. YouTube, we're going to talk about YouTube. Books, lectures, and podcasts. Wow, that's three of the things we're going to talk about. Google. My parents, that's a good one. Nightmares.
Interesting.
Recommendations, teachers, peers, parents, that's a good one. My life experiences. Khan Academy, great one.
Conversations. Hello, dialogue. We love to see that.
Mm-hmm.
failures. That's really important.
Cross-checking several news sites or asking my parents or friends. That's cool. Friends' diverse experiences.
Anywhere that makes me curious. I think that's an amazing answer.
The adults around you, people have experience. Yep. Research, history. Good one, Mary.
I agree with Allison. Your relatives are an amazing source of knowledge.
Will learns from Twitter. So do I, Will. People think you can't learn from Twitter, but you can if you follow the right people.
Very true.
TikTok, self-reflection, my family. These are all great answers. Instagram. Treks. Yes. Good answer, Gary. Ooh, lots of nonfiction. These are really cool answers. Thank you, everybody. Okay, so some of you mentioned learning from school, classes, parents, family. That's all great. But in this lesson, we want to try to expose you to other types of learning to expand your learning. And that way you don't have to learn just what's been decided for you by other people. And if there's one takeaway from this lesson, it's that you can take control of your own learning. Now, some of you already mentioned this, which is fantastic, but we're going to go in depth on 5 free ways that you can learn about any topic. We're going to talk about YouTube, which you mentioned, podcasts, websites, massive open online courses, and then, of course, old standby books. So we're going to go in depth on each of these. First one we're going to talk about is YouTube. So for those of you that learn on YouTube, what kinds of YouTube videos do you watch? Do you have a favorite channel? And then I'm going to share some of our recommendations afterwards.
Right, starting off strong with Jubilee. Definitely agree. We have a very cool trek with some members from Jubilee.
Crash Course, yes. Love John Green.
John Green's TikTok is like my favorite thing on the internet right now.
I didn't know he had a TikTok. Oh my gosh.
It's like the YouTube videos, but funnier and like shorter.
Yeah, it must be out of control because he's so fast already on the YouTube videos. Vox, that's a good one. TED Talks. Oh, your own channel, Caleb. We gotta watch your channel.
I'm seeing a lot of Vox. They are masters at storytelling and informing.
Yeah, it looks like we have a lot of people with either YouTube channels or TED Talks in this fellowship, which doesn't surprise me. So we gotta watch some of these.
Oh, I miss the Patriot Act. That used to be a really great Netflix special.
Great. Okay. So thank you for all those recommendations. I definitely want to check out some of these. This is going to be no surprise to some of you, or maybe it is because YouTube started around when some of you maybe were just born. It did not used to be as educational of a resource. It was a place for a lot of silly videos, cute baby videos, cat videos, or people would upload them and their friends doing kind of dumb things. YouTube was the place for that. That was before there was a Snapchat or a TikTok. And it has really changed into an educational almost institution. Some of you mentioned Khan Academy. Saul Khan was one of the pioneers of this. He saw such an opportunity to put educational material on YouTube instead of it just being about cat videos. And so some tips from one of our founders, Gary. He loves to listen at multiple speeds. So Give that a shot if you want to save time and you think you don't mind listening to someone speak quickly. I wouldn't do that for John Green though, because he speaks pretty pretty fast already. That might be a little crazy. And you can also watch book summaries really quickly as well. So if you don't have time to read a whole book and you want to get the gist of it, YouTube's a great place for that. And it's really kind of changing the world in that regard. So I'm happy that some of you are already on there. If you just want to watch cat videos or silly videos, that's cool too, but tons of educational content on YouTube.
And kind of transitioning from the internet to books, what are some of your favorite books? I'm excited to see these responses, especially from our fellowship book club. I know you guys have been really great with that.
Ooh, Meditations, Marcus Aurelius, The Outsiders, War and Peace. I have been scared to read War and Peace. That's incredible, Brianna.
A Thousand Splendid Suns and Kite Runner have been my go-to answers about my favorite books for years. Those are amazing.
1984, such an important book. That and Animal Farm, obviously highly recommended.
Wonder was a really eye-opening book. I remember when that came out.
Nancy Drew, Handmaid's Tale. These are cool.
Hood Feminism.
Yeah, Crime and Punishment. That's an amazing book. So hard sometimes to get into. If you know the original Russian, I've heard it's even better.
Anything by Angela Davis is gold. I fully agree with that one.
Dan Brown. Don't sleep on Where's Waldo, Gary. Those are, especially visual learning. That's a great way to learn visually.
I don't know about that, but each their own.
To Kill a Mockingbird, classic. Night, yes. Ellie Wiesel, yes. Fantastic. All right.
I mean, books don't have the greatest reputation, this we could admit to, but they are still essential to any learning journey. The best ones are distilled by some of the most smartest and experienced and wisest people. And that even extends to like the fiction world. So just thinking about also the fact that you can opt out to audiobooks. Here's a short list of recommendations from the CU staff. So Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison. I've personally read that, really, really good. A People's History of the United States, I feel like it's definitely something that pops up a lot in conversation and it's worth the hype, a great addition to the list. Breaking the Two-Party Doom Loop by Lee Drutman, definitely more on a democratic systems approach to reading, but incredible insight. And then No Citizen Left Behind, also a really great read. And books are really great for kind of getting into like a deeper lens into information. And so if you find a topic that you want to learn more about, a book is definitely a great place to go to after kind of starting that learning journey on a topic.
Okay, next topic is going to be websites. So some of you mentioned these already, but we can run through this quickly. What are some websites you use to stay informed? Times, AP News, Twitter, BBC, Atlantic.
Instagram. Google, TikTok, and Instagram. Very true.
Britannica, USA Today,
A lot of these websites also have like really great like email inbox kind of news recaps, which are good.
True. I have no idea what Dariel's talking about, but I hope that's a trusted news source. Oh, National Geographic. That's one of CU's partners. Cool one.
Actually, I think I know what Dariel's talking about. And he like wears a red shirt and delivers the news in the most to the point, straightforward way. It's
Oh,
actually really good.
cool. All right, thank you for these. So some of our suggestions here about respected websites. So the first caveat is there are a ton of terrible websites and news that are out there. Sometimes you can just tell by clicking on a website, and if you have like 5 videos loading everywhere and pop-ups and stuff, it's probably not a good sign that you're going to be getting a good experience on that website. But there are still some trusted sources to go to. So Wikipedia. I'm going to really date myself here, but when I was in high school, teachers used to say, "Do not use Wikipedia. You can't trust it. This source is anybody could write on there. It's crazy. Don't trust Wikipedia." Well, you can trust it. It's actually a great place to start from. I'm not saying that 100% of everything on Wikipedia is true. There are some errors on there, but they can be corrected by the community that's a part of Wikipedia. And it's great to learn about a topic you know nothing about. Great starting point. Vox, which many of you already suggested. Ballotpedia, a great democracy website. You can see what's on the ballot in every state, who's running for every single office, and learn about the candidates there. Awesome website. And then Oye. If you are interested in the law, and especially the Supreme Court, Oye has every Supreme Court case that's ever been decided, little explainers about them, the full cases. It is incredible. It's a project that was started about 20 years ago, and it is the authority on the Supreme Court. So definitely check that out. A couple reminders. Here, remember that when you're reading the news, it's important to read everything with a filter, no matter where it comes from. You always want to take into account the source and bias. This is something that you should be learning in your history classes, to source the author of the piece and to identify what the bias is, because there always is going to be some kind of bias in there, and it's important to recognize that. And so the best way to combat that in modern day is to sample from many different sources to ensure you're getting a balanced diet and not just relying on one source.
All right. And so moving on to another rapid response question. Have any of you taken an online course, AKA an MOOC? If not, are there any courses or topics you're interested in but are unavailable at your school? Well, technically, we've all kind of been taking online classes this year, if we're being completely honest.
Like a very formal or specific one, maybe, if it was on like chemistry or something.
So civic engagement isn't offered at some schools, which is really interesting. Um, I went to high school in Ontario in Canada, and civics is actually like a course that's required of everyone in the country to take, which is very different from the States. YouTube definitely counts here.
Oh, cognitive science classes, women in history, sewing class. Yeah, I actually took sewing in high school, and it was beneficial.
Love the idea of taking creative writing. That is such an important craft.
YouTube philosophy.
Madison, the meaning crisis definitely, definitely counts. Oh, that's a really good point on the note of like tutorials that happen on YouTube, like makeup tutorials.
Yeah. I mean, that still counts as online learning, I think. Definitely. These are cool responses. All right.
So massive open online courses, also called MOOCs, they're essentially like free college courses that you can take online, and they're absolutely amazing, sourced from some of the best professors in the world, and totally accessible. So you can learn about really obscure topics that probably aren't offered in your school, or like really foundational life skills. So some ones that we definitely recommend checking out include EDX. EDX is like a leader in MOOCs. Class Central, we are all familiar with Khan Academy, and Acumen is also a really great source if you want to focus in more on things that are related to social change. I personally don't love open online courses, and they had different formatting that made that a little bit more accessible for me. So I would definitely recommend checking them out too.
Yeah, the one criticism of these is that you're really learning as an individual. You don't really learn in community. And so that's one of the things that we at CU tried to kind of go beyond the MOOCs by bringing people together and having them in Juntos, for instance, so that they could learn together and not just as an individual. Okay. Last one we're going to do is podcasts. What are some of the podcasts that you listen to?
I am slowly learning to love podcasts, so I'm really excited about these recommendations. NPR is pretty famous for a good reason.
American History Tellers. It's okay if you don't listen to podcasts. We definitely we know. I mean, one of our co-founders has never listened to a podcast, and he's doing okay still.
Oh, I didn't know Vox had a podcast. That'd be cool to listen to.
How to Save a Planet, This American Life. That's a classic. We'll take a couple more responses. ABC.
It's cool to see how like other established forms of media also have something connected to a podcast.
Thanks, Darielle, but I could barely get my microphone working for your and Elena's podcast, so I don't think I'll be doing that anytime soon.
Oh yes, Mission Control. That's actually probably the only podcast I regularly listen to. So
Yeah, big plug for Darielle and Elena's podcast, Mission Control. That's the only podcast that we should be listening to. But if you do want to branch out into more, podcasts are a really cool way to be exposed to the edge of a discussion of every field imaginable. And then, if you want to dig deeper beyond that edge, you can go deeper into whichever field you like. It's a really cool way to learn a little bit about a subject and see if you want to learn more. Again, you can listen on multiple speeds to save time. That's Gary's method. I'm just dipping my toe in that water. I've started at 1.2x for some podcasts on Spotify, but I can't go 1.5. It's too fast for me. Some podcasts to check out are here that you may not have heard of. Throughline, it's a history podcast. Revisionist History, a Malcolm Gladwell podcast. Stuff you should know that's been around forever, since kind of the dawn of podcasts, and they're really short, but you can learn about thousands and thousands of topics there. Encyclopedia Womanica, really short tales about famous women throughout history. 99% Invisible, which is an architecture podcast and design podcast if you're into that stuff. And then Radio Lab, which has tons of different topics. And so if you asked every CU team member what their favorite podcasts were, you'd get a different answer. So if you want to learn more, you can feel free to email me or Slack anybody on the team, and they can give you their recommendations. All right, so that is the end of the lesson. We definitely have some announcements coming up, but our takeaways for tonight are: one, that there are some verifiable scientific truths about how we learn that we discussed tonight, but those are not a substitute for figuring out what works best for you. And then second, there are so many free options available to you that it's possible to self-educate on almost any topic you can imagine. At this point, no one can say that there is no material out there for them to learn. It is, there is a ton out there.
All right. And so this week's quest is a great one. It's on inspirations. And so there's an exercise that will be emailed out to you because understanding what inspires you is essential to figuring out what you want to work on long term. And so I definitely recommend staying on track with the leadership blueprint and especially working on this exercise.
Okay, this week's recommendation. I linked an article from Education Week, an education magazine, about a high school student who's fighting for her free speech rights at the Supreme Court. This goes back to our Nick's New Knowledge session on free speech. This case is about a young woman who was cut from her cheerleading team and then went on Instagram and used some expletives about the school, about the cheerleading squad, some coaches, and she got suspended for it. And she is suing, saying that the school cannot punish her for her speech that's essentially off campus, out of school, on her Instagram. Now, this has really broad implications for any of you that are in high school, because the Supreme Court might rule that schools have the right to monitor and punish you for what's said essentially off campus. Or the Supreme Court might say that is way too far and a school cannot regulate that speech. Fascinating case. It's going to add to the jurisprudence of student free speech rights. And so you can take a look at the article. You might be surprised at what organizations are supporting this young woman in her case. And if you want to talk about this during your Junto, please do. I think it's an interesting case to discuss. Announcements. Like I was saying earlier, episode 2 of Nick's New Knowledge will be this Wednesday night at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. The topic is going to be voting rights in Georgia's new voting legislation. It should be a very interesting lesson. On Saturday, we have 2 hangouts this week. For our international fellows, there's a Saturday morning hangout at 11:30 a.m., but everyone is welcome to join that. And it is going to be a trivia night. Really excited about it. Second, there's going to be a fishbowl game at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. This is a game that combines charades, password, and taboo. If you've never played it, I've heard it's really fun. I like all 3 of those games, especially taboo, really fun. So hope you can join that. And then finally, when I send out my recap email tonight, I'm going to share with you a fellowship feedback survey. We really, really would like you to fill out this survey. It will help us make sure that this fellowship during the second half of it is tailored to your needs, and hopefully we can improve your experience here. So please fill out that survey by Friday to have your voice heard. Okay, that's it for tonight. We'll do some Q&A. So please put your questions in the Zoom Q&A, and we'll answer some for the next 10 minutes or so. And afterwards, Darielle will post the link to a breakout hangout.
Awesome. Excited to see some of your questions. And just to kind of reiterate on that last point about making sure to fill out that survey, that is definitely a way that you can contribute to your CU community and show some leadership. So if you want to remind your Junto during this week's Junto, that would also be really great. David asked if CU is actually changing its name. No, that was just a little April Fool's joke brought to you by Dariel. There's no CU rebrand happening in the near future.
Oh, the Pomodoro technique. Yeah, that's where you set a timer for learning. That's a really cool technique. Thank you, Ahmad.
So Adam asked, what are some of our inspirations? I'll pass this off to Nick as well, but I think personally, the things that have inspired me the most are lived experiences or witnessing other people's lived experience. So being inspired by the world, I feel like that's a little broad, but it's a cliche for a reason. It's a pretty inspiring place to be. But yeah, Nick, your thoughts?
in life, I guess I'm inspired by my parents, immigrants from Greece. Really inspired by their parents' stories, and then day to day, my team members at CU, seeing their work ethic and the drive they have to make this organization what it is.
Yes, being inspired by the CU team is definitely something I can add on to. All right, we have another question. How can we suggest to adults to diversify the ways they require us to learn? Especially having ADD, it's been difficult. Well, Nick actually has a background in teaching, so I feel like you're better equipped to answer this question.
Well, I found that if you approach most teachers openly and honestly, and respectfully, they're going to listen to that. So if you said to them, I would prefer to learn this way, they should accommodate that. And especially if you have ADD, you might even be able to see if you can get an IEP at your school, an individual education plan, where they legally have to provide you with those different ways to learn. We don't have to get into the specifics now, but if you want any help with that, you can email me or Slack me. But teachers should be making those accommodations for you.
And the next question is, what is something significant had to unlearn? For me personally, something that I had to not necessarily unlearn, but then also like become aware of at all was the fact that like I come from an immigrant background, my parents are immigrants. So I've never really considered myself like my contribution or my role when it comes to taking like living on indigenous land and what that entails. And so like becoming aware of that at all and understanding that even though I don't come from like a conventional place of privilege, I still have a lot of like work and learning to do in that context. So that was something that I had to become aware of and to kind of unlearn and realize that I have, room to grow and understand when it comes to that. But very good question. Also going to hand this off to Nick.
Yeah, I mean, I had to unlearn a lot about how other people live. I grew up in a primarily white suburb, and so then moving to cities for the next 10, 15 years, had to unlearn biases that I may have had, um, and just become more aware of people from other backgrounds. So yeah.
A next question is, how can you encourage others to be accepting of different learning styles? This person has ADHD and they get teased because of like the difference in learning styles that they have to have in schools.
Well, first of all, that is not good. That sucks. I'm sorry about that. I mean, again, I think you shouldn't have to bear that burden all on your own. This is a place where your teachers and administrators and adults should be playing a role and should be helping you to make sure you're accommodated for these learning styles and not require everybody to be learning in the exact same way. So first thing I would do is either talk to a teacher or a trusted administrator about making sure you get those accommodations. And then as far as peers go, the kids obviously can be cruel sometimes, which is really awful and unfortunate. But I think if you can find a trusted community at your school, or at least a few people that are more accepting of it, then I think you'll be on the right path. And look, I think you just have to try to drown out some of the other voices if they're not being receptive to what you're going through.
Yes, definitely. And I would definitely add to that there's like a very specific mindset that exists in high school that doesn't necessarily extend to like college and just like other communities beyond that. So in some instances, it's also a matter of just kind of growing past that era. It won't always be like this is definitely something I can say.
Such a great note there, Chabu. You don't really get to choose often your peers when you're in high school and younger, but after that you do. And there's a lot better things ahead, I think, for some people.
Well, that looks like the end of Q&A. There aren't too many questions left.
Great, perfect. So 8:15 on the dot. This was fantastic. Thank you, Chabu, for being our co-host tonight. Thank you, everyone, for coming back after break and listening to this lesson. We hope you enjoyed it. We will see you next Monday for another bonfire, and I'll see you on Wednesday if you want to learn more about voting rights in America.
Awesome. All right, then, everyone have a great rest of the night.
Bye.